Welcome to The Fighter with Chris Sims. I am Chris Sims. I'm the Alberta Director for the Canadian Taxpayers Federation. Thank you so much for watching the show. If you haven't done so yet, be sure to like this video, subscribe to the YouTube channel, and share it with your friends who need to know what is going on. Okay, we've got a big show for you today because it is a big week on Parliament Hill. The budget. Finally, yeah, you know that thing that's usually out in March? Well, it's coming out tomorrow in February. The federal budget is coming out, and this isn't just, fiscal Christmas for, nerds who like our pocket protectors and our spreadsheets present, okay? But it's really important for everyday working Canadians because this is basically the stress test for the government. This is where we get a look at the books and see where the government is spending your money. And the bottom line is this. The main number that matters in the budget tomorrow is how much is the Carney government adding to the debt. It doesn't matter what label on the bucket of spending, what that says, okay? Doesn't matter if it's in the capital bucket or the operating bucket, okay? That cute little thing that they're trying to do with the budget to try to, squint and look at it sideways and maybe decide that it's not looking so bad. That's all smoke and mirrors, okay? That is all a distraction, okay? What matters is how much money are they adding to the debt? Because right now, our debt is more than $1.2 trillion. Former Prime Minister Justin Trudeau, who was fiscally illiterate, okay, who never balanced the budget, not even one time, okay, he doubled the debt in 10 years. Trudeau doubled the debt in 10 years. So now all eyes are on the new guy, okay? Is the new boss going to be the same as the old boss, okay? Or will Prime Minister Mark Carney, who is no slouch when it comes to math, okay? The guy's got a PhD from Oxford in economics. He's the former head of the Bank of Canada, former head of the Bank of England. Is this guy going to do a better job with the budget than Trudeau? What he said earlier about this isn't super comforting. I think if you're listening to it with an ear of like a normal working person, we've got Prime Minister Mark Carney. Remember how I described that dude went to Oxford? Okay. He hasn't been eating a lot of macaroni soup, okay, or shopping for used running shoes lately, to put this nicely. He hasn't been experiencing the same sort of financial difficulties the way a lot of working Canadians have been, okay? And he came out and said that Canadians have to be prepared to make sacrifices. Listen to this clip.
We won't transform our economy easily or in a few months. It will take some sacrifices, and it will take some time. Our government will work relentlessly to cut waste and drive efficiencies. And when we have to make difficult choices, we will be thoughtful, we'll be transparent, and we'll be fair.
Okay, so what do you think about that clip? Let me know in the comments, because I don't feel great about him using the word transforming the economy. They don't need to transform the economy. They need to get out of the way of the economy, okay? Canada is blessed with a ton of natural resources and a lot of hardworking people. All government needs to do in this context is take the foot off of the neck of normal working people, especially in the resource sector. There's no magical transformation that we need to do to our economy. The problem is the federal government. The problem is what the Trudeau government did the last 10 years. But when he's talking about cutting waste and getting rid of inefficiencies, that's a good thing. So we're going to have to wait and see for tomorrow, I guess, to find out which Mark Carney is going to turn up for work. Now, again, what did he mean by sacrifices? I just wanted to remind people, okay, that we have got around 50% of Canadians, half of Canadians reporting that they're around $200 every month of not being able to make the minimum payments on their bills. We've got record numbers of working families needing to go to food banks What that actually means, if you think about it, working families going to food banks, is that a parent who's holding down a job still counts on donated jars of charity peanut butter to feed their kid. That's what that means. Okay. What does Pierre Poilievre, the leader of the Conservative Party, the leader of the opposition, what are his thoughts on what's going to happen tomorrow with the budget? Let's listen.
Do you want an election before Christmas?
We want an affordable budget that will give Canadians affordable life before Christmas. That's my priority. We shouldn't be playing, Mark Carney shouldn't be playing games and trying to force an election. He should be sitting down with us. I'm willing to work all through the night, tonight and tomorrow, to come up with an affordable budget that will make an affordable life for Canadians. But we will not vote to raise grocery prices and increase housing costs as the Liberals have done over the last decade. Canadians cannot afford any more Liberal sacrifices. So my message is one of let's bring in a budget that's affordable so that we can have hope, jobs, and homes for all Canadians.
So you'll notice there how Poilievre keyed in on the word sacrifices too. Like, that was not a good thing for Carney to have said, especially where people are struggling already so much after 10 years of Trudeau. And he was just a fiscal dumpster fire. There's no way of sugarcoating it or putting it nicely. Just off the top there, the reason why that reporter asked Pierre Poilievre, do you want an election before Christmas? Okay, I might be the minority view on this, and it might be because I'm out of the bubble on Parliament Hill and I'm working here in Lethbridge, but the press gallery needs something to talk about for 2 weeks leading up to a budget, okay? And I've seen this happen before, okay? It's like, throwing popcorn out to a crowd, okay? It gets them talking and doing stuff. What has happened is there's this rumor going around on Parliament Hill saying, oh, maybe the NDP is going to bring down the Carney government and force an election before Christmas. Now, I might be wrong. And if I am wrong, I will buy Brian Lilly a banana split, okay? But I don't think I'm wrong, because look at the math. Look at how many seats the NDP has, okay? The NDP, in my opinion, is not going to bring Carney down. Why? Well, for starters, they don't have a leader. So who's going to be on the debate stage for the leaders' debate in this mythical election leading up to Christmas? The interim leader? What's he going to say? What he hopes the new leader is going to say? Like, what? No. Second, the NDP doesn't have gas money to put into a minivan, okay? It cannot afford an election. An election campaigns involves a lot of stuff, okay? Traveling. Remember how Jagmeet Singh was on the bus? Okay, he wasn't even using a plane. Forget the bus. We're down to like a go-kart. No. So, in my opinion, this is just kind of churn for the press gallery to talk about for, 2 weeks to 10 days leading up to a budget. It's also a good way to kind of cow the NDP into coming on side even stronger. So, in my opinion, the NDP is either going to vote with the government in favor of the budget or they'll just abstain, which means the budget passes either way. Okay. More importantly, what does this budget mean for Canada's finances? What will the bottom line be? Will we be able to bring industry and investment back into Canada and start improving our economy so that people are going to have better jobs and ultimately be able to pay lower taxes? Let's find out. Joining me now is that smart fella, Michael Campbell. He is the host of Money Talks. Be sure, if you are not yet a subscriber, be sure to subscribe to him online, because that's where you get really insightful market analysis in a way that people like me can understand. And I sure as heck did not grow up on Wall Street. Michael Campbell, thank you so much once again for joining the show.
My pleasure. Absolutely. Tons of stuff to talk about.
Oh my goodness. Okay, so we were talking a little bit offline, and I was speaking with my friend Franco over the weekend about this too. Can you please explain to our viewers, does it matter that Prime Minister Mark Carney is divvying up his budget into operating and capital when it comes to spending? At the end of the day, what does that mean, and does it matter?
Does not matter to the credit markets. And we got to remember that's who's financing. I mean, we need to borrow money. In fact, here's a number that'll blow you away. We need $623 billion estimated this year alone. Why? Because we don't pay off our maturing debt. So we got about 76% of that is maturing debt. So we need someone to lend us that money again, and about 24%. And it's an estimate because we haven't seen the budget and where they plan to spend their money. We've been announcement after announcement. It's tough to accumulate them all, but the estimate is about 24% of that will be new spending. And that's every year now, right through 2029-30. So that's our biggest problem, is who's going to lend us the money and at what rate. They don't care how we categorize our spending. They don't care if we borrowed 10 billion for potato chips or 10 billion for microcomputer chips. They don't care. So that's really the thing, that it will obfuscate that. I mean, there's a lot of criticisms because the definition. I made the claim when Prime Minister Carney first said he was going to do this. I said, great, well, I can balance the budget maybe by tomorrow morning then, because you can, the definitions of what qualifies specifically as an investment compared to what's operating is still very loose. And that's what the Parliamentary Budget Office says, the definitions. So, for example, keep in mind, they called ArriveCan an investment in like security. They called the CBC an investment in heritage and culture. They called Sustainable Technology Development Canada, an investment in technology and all of those things. And one more, because it's been on top of the news. They've been calling our EV manufacturing investments. Well, they've been darn poor investments to this point. But my point is, they're setting the definition. And I think that lends itself to, let's see how strict they are in applying it, because they're talking about tax credits, for example, as an investment. That's not what I think traditionally is assumed to be that. So yeah, those things are all coming home to roost at this point. I don't think it makes any difference to the credit markets, what are, the way we've categorized. Just like right now, we do categorize what our health transfers are. We do categorize what, highway expenditure is. They don't care. What's the total number? And are they going to get their money back when they lend it to us through the bond market when it matures? That's what they care about.
Does Prime Minister Mark Carney understand that? I think I'm safe in saying that former Prime Minister Justin Trudeau had no understanding of that. None. Not even the faintest glimmer. Doesn't Carney understand that?
I think he does. I assume of course he has to, actually. I mean,
Yeah,
and I agree with you also. I never knew what Prime Minister Trudeau understood about any of the stuff he did. He didn't prioritize. I think it's very fair to say he never prioritized the economy or economic growth. He had other issues. Climate change, probably number one. Number two, LGBTQ, reconciliation, all of those things. But they weren't about creating economic growth. And presto, look where we've landed. I mean, we have this declining productivity per capita, which economists will tell you, if you're only going to use one measure about our standard of living or success or failure, that's what they'd look at. So it's declining. Capital investment is declining. There are many, many pressing issues right now. And I'm sure Prime Minister Carney understands that, but he has a real challenge within his own caucus. You have people like Stephen Guilbeault. I mean, he is not in favor of economic growth at the expense of anything to do with climate change. He's got many of the same cabinet ministers are in there that were in for the, several years of the Trudeau government. So I think that might be a problem. I think he still has a climate agenda, which of course is a hot topic about whether the government supports, for example, a pipeline to the West Coast, for oil. So he's got all of those challenges within him, but I think he does understand it. And I summarized his speech, what was it, about 10 days ago, he did the national speech. I summarized it, if you were going to make a bet on the private sector or make a bet on further government intervention, he's chosen further government intervention. And what worries me about that is the track record is abysmal. I mean, really, I just looking at the numbers. So clearly whatever's happened to this point, hasn't worked. And secondly, those things like examples like Stellantis or Northvolt, they give them the money for an EV battery and it declares bankruptcy protection within 12 months. The track record is not good when the government says, I'm going to pick the winner. So
when do lights come on? Like, when do those dashboard indicator warning lights actually show up for politicians? Because I keep running into this where I had a lot of experience on the Hill back when Chrétien was prime minister and Paul Martin was finance minister, and nobody's perfect. Okay. They had lots of things that they did as a government that, wouldn't have been good. However, they had some people who seemed to understand how the economy worked. We were speaking with people like Dan McTagg and John Manley, like these members of parliament who seemed to understand the need for fiscal restraint and fiscal discipline, because the deficit, which is basically a yearly debt. So a deficit is like a miniature debt that is added on to the big debt every single year. They finally were taking that seriously after years and years of budget overruns, because eventually those creditors that you were talking about there stopped lending them money. In Saskatchewan, provincially, they ran into that, where back in the day, in the 1990s, they ran into a situation where, yep, sorry, bud, no more money coming in for you. They wound up having to close like dozens and dozens of rural hospitals. Like, things got pretty rough there. So my question to you, Michael, is, with this new prime minister, I'm hoping he has different advisors that he's brought in from like the real world, from the private business and industry world. When do those dashboard crash indicator lights pop up for this guy?
Well, clearly they didn't when the interim parliamentary budget officer, Jason Jacques, was there and warning about this is unsustainable. He used language that he was criticized for in some quarters because it was, but I'm thinking from his point of view, asking the same question. What is it going to take for you guys in Parliament to understand this is a serious situation? And I got to say something about Paul Martin and Jean Chrétien. This is not the same Liberal Party. Clearly it's not the same Liberal Party. I mean, Paul Martin, worked diligently to get finances under control and with the support of Prime Minister Chrétien. So I don't see any similarity whatsoever when it comes to public finances with the current government. And we'll see with Mark Carney, but so far he hasn't given me any indication that is similar to Paul Martin. I think Mr. Carney's approach is going to be government intervention to grow the economy faster than, of course, our expenditures. And that's been a big problem under the last, I looked like since 2020, for example, program spending's up 65%. The economy grew 8 to 10%. Well, that's not
Correct.
a good formula. And I think he would understand that. But it's more his belief that the government can be a major player in goosing that productivity and goosing, economic growth, GDP growth. And that remains to be seen. That's the big government model. I'm not betting on it personally, by the way, but that's the big government model. So he does acknowledge that he knows that's a problem, but it's what the solutions are going forward. And of course, sorry, I'm going on, but it's so problematic to not be taking advantage of our greatest resource. I mean, we're the only country doing that to this degree. And, this will be the final blow, whether he's going to, whether it's, in one time he goes to Quebec in French language and says he's not going to do pipelines against the First Nations or provincial objections. Another, about 3 days before he said he would. It's a national priority. So we'll get a chance to really see that in black and white coming up. I'm not so sure our house gets back in order without taking full advantage of our most important and most productive resource.
I wanted to zero in on that right now. We were speaking with Professor Ian Lee, very smart gentleman from the Sprott School of Business there in Ottawa. And he basically said, hey, to your point, hello, like, we're sitting on, a treasury of oil and gas here. We have got a ton of natural resources. So we have got all of this stuff, even apart from oil and gas, all of our minerals and rare earth minerals and potash and like the stuff, okay, geographically under our feet that the rest of the world wants to buy with money for us. Like, this should be pretty clear. Like, if as a family, if you're worried about your finances, one of the first things you look at is, where's the money coming in from? Do I need to pick up a second job? Does someone else need to pick up a second job? Can we cut back on our spending? Like, this is not rocket science. And so this is where I think a lot of regular people are getting frustrated here, Mike, is that we've got access to all of this stuff that we can sell to other countries for profit in order to your point, goose that level of the budget, okay, the revenue side of the budget coming in, because it's not just royalties that come in, it's the income taxes that come in from the folks who are building those pipelines and working in those industries who have those big energy and resource jobs, because those are high-paying jobs and they're long-term jobs. And they pay higher income taxes, which brings in more revenue for government. Okay, so the last little bit of hope I had was about a month or so ago, it feels like, is when they were talking about the Keystone Pipeline. Suddenly that word came back up because last I checked, we had it built right to our border and then Biden killed it. Biden's not in the White House anymore. There's a guy in there that kind of likes pipelines. So this is where I'm hoping that push comes to shove and that Carney says, you know what? We need to take advantage of our natural resources. Couldn't he convince himself here, Michael? Couldn't he convince himself that government is doing good by getting out of the way? Or do they need that credit so bad that they would rather go to the casino and gamble on corporate welfare projects?
Well, I think with Keystone, it was a political ploy. It certainly doesn't address the things they were talking about in February and March, April, June, which is diversify our customer base. That would be a U.S. pipeline, through the U.S. consumer. It wouldn't, as opposed to Asia, which would do that diversification. We were talked so much about. By the way, we talked specifically the same words in 2018 with Trump and the aluminum and steel tariffs. Then we didn't do anything about it. But so yes, that would certainly help because it's still more product going out, et cetera. Again, I think the challenge is that we've had a lot of mixed messages to this point. We've had them acknowledge, Tim Hodgson, who is the energy minister, acknowledge we've got a terrible regulatory process going on. That's the other challenge. Keep in mind, we have short-term problems. You alluded to earlier. We have people who are having trouble making ends meet. And we don't need to chronicle. There's 1.5 million people without jobs, 2.2 million used food banks in March, that kind of thing. Well, these are long-term projects. Nothing in what we've been discussing broadly over the last couple of months has addressed the need for attracting capital investment, because that's where you start. There's no economic growth. If I want to expand my restaurant, I need capital. It doesn't matter. If I want to start a business, I need capital. Well, Canada has not been in a positive competitive position. And look at what across the border, they're lowering taxes. They're lowering the cost of regulation. That's our competition, immediate competition. So now we're reading about companies saying, I'm going to relocate to the States. And there seems to be a new one every couple of days there. We have to address that competitive aspect. So finally, I'll say that we've got short-term problems and long-term problems. There's sort of 5 major capital investments we could talk about, but that's still a long-term solution. Critical minerals is the new buzzword. I don't know. They couldn't discover it 2 years ago, but now they've got it in the dictionary. You're still looking at 10 to 15 years to go from discovery into production in that way. I mean, along the way, of course, you're building stuff, so there will be some income and there will be some jobs. But the point is, we need some short-term, mid-term, and long-term. And I think that's very difficult to argue against. Again, that's why this budget's got so many people with eyes on it. Are they finally going to answer some questions they have not answered? The Prime Minister's not answered in 6 months.
That's why I brought up Keystone, because it felt a little bit more shorter term, because last I was told, I actually had a friend's husband who was working on it when it got canned. Last I was told, it was built on the Canadian side, at least, up to the border. So it felt a little shorter term than, say, one out to the West Coast, which, by the way, we also need to get rid of the West Coast tanker ban, because it'd be all fine and good to have a pipeline out there. But if we can't fill ships with the stuff that we have coming out of the pipeline, then what exactly are we doing? Michael, before I let you go, so again, I'm a layman here, but if Carney announced, okay, all that stuff that was bad, okay, Bill C-69, the no more pipelines, the West Coast tanker ban, any of the other regulatory strangling red tape, if he said that's gone today, gone, order in council, I'm getting rid of all of it. I don't care how fast I need to move, it's happening right now. Poof. Is that short term? Like, is that more of like a green light dinner bell for capital investors? Do they hear things like that and say, hey, maybe I will put my money there now?
Well, of course, that talks to regulation. That would be a good thing, reducing regulation. Taxation, we have to be competitive with the states when it comes to taxation. Also, though, again, my first question, by the way, would have been, what took you so long? If you were going to do this, why didn't you do it 6 months ago, for goodness sakes? There's a lot of things we can talk about with that. We haven't taken our economic growth seriously in a long time. And I'll give you an example. Weren't we supposed to have no provincial trade barriers by July 1st? Well, we find out that's a lot easier to say than it is to do, because it's provinces and the federal government. I'm not doubting the federal government would like to get rid of them, but clearly we have problems on the provincial level there. But that's more than offsets anything with the Trump tariffs. So there's the other big thing that we're really discussing, and a bigger issue is uncertainty. Nobody knows. That is not why people make capital investments. You mentioned Keystone. Well, do we have any doubt that the Trump administration would support it? Of course they would. But that's an example of one area of capital investment, but there's so many others. The level of uncertainty, and some of it is not caused by Canadians, it's the Trump tariff approach. But in my opinion, that should have been clear years ago. I mean, Trump started to talk about tariff as my favorite word back in November. We made no reaction to that whatsoever. And here we are running these Reagan-esque ads. Where were you 12 months ago? I said right away, tell Americans it's going to cost them more. Don't talk about Canada. Talk about it's going to cost you more. I still think that's effective. They have been saying that, and certain governors certainly have. But again, what are those ads really accomplishing? It was 12 months late. And there's a lot of things like that create this level of uncertainty. And there's alternatives, and the U.S. is providing themselves for a lot of reasons as a positive alternative for capital investment. So we've got our work cut out for it. Excuse me. And I think we've got 15 minutes to solve it. That's how pressing it is.
Reminds me, showing our generations here reminds me of that. How close are we to midnight? 4 minutes to midnight type thing. Yeah. Michael Campbell, I really appreciate your insight here. I will check back with you after the budget. I'm still trying to be hopeful here that the smart guy will win out and realize that we've got a huge bloated bureaucracy. We're wasting way too much money, and we have got to get regular capital investment, smart guys and gals back in Canada spending their money on big projects. Any last words on the budget and your hopes for tomorrow?
Just a reminder that the budget are forecast numbers. They are not held accountable for. I'm not blaming them, but I mean, think of all the variables they're dealing with. We shouldn't be talking about them as if they're certainty. Secondly, this has nothing to do with the incredible reports that are coming out of our Auditor General for a number of years of how much of our tax dollars are wasted. And I just don't want people to assume this is going to be effective spending. No matter what it is, whether it's cut in half, it still doesn't mean that last half is effective. Nobody is addressing that issue. We haven't heard a word from government, not from the Liberal Party, and they've been in power now 10 years. But I don't think the Conservatives dare take that on, because of the power of the public sector unions. But we've got a problem that way.
Michael Campbell, host of Money Talks. Be sure to subscribe. Thank you so much, sir.
My pleasure.
Once again, that is host Michael Campbell. He has his own show called Money Talks. It's been on forever, and he explains stuff that way. I'm not some capital investor from other countries, but I still understand what he's talking about because Michael is such a great communicator, and he keeps his eye on the markets and what smart, intelligent, wealthy people are doing with their money. And unfortunately, they're not parking it in Canada, which is what we need them to do. What do you guys think? Leave a comment, please. Leave a note in the comments. What are your hopes for the budget? Do you think that the economist Carney is going to win out? Or do you think that the guy who used to work at the UN, Carney, is going to win out when it comes to the budget? Folks, if you haven't done so yet, be sure to like this video, subscribe to the YouTube channel, head on over to Juno News, and become a subscriber and a supporter of Juno News, because remember, journalists must not be paid by the government. Most importantly, share this video with your friends who need to know.